it was a great year, and I love that. And that's basically, I'm just giving you the lead to my column for the Morris paper because that's perfect. It's like, no, it wasn't a rough year. It was a rough year. I had cancer, stage 1 lymphoma. It was a great year in that I beat it. I'm healthy. My family's going to spend lots of quality time with me over the next 4 or 5 decades, and so on. And I didn't think he did a very good job as manager last year. I thought he made way too many excuses for his players. I thought the team was unprepared. I thought that the overall philosophy of the team was bad. I also think he got saddled with bad players. It's not his fault that Sandoval was overweight. It's not his fault that Hanley Ramirez couldn't play left field. I still think he made mistakes. The cancer scare has reinvigorated him. He deserves to be here, and this whole business about the uncomfortableness between him and Torey Lovullo, in my opinion, is way overstated.
Yeah, I mean, they brought back Torey Lovullo. I think they gave him some more money. It's a 2-year contract. They asked him not to talk to other teams about managerial positions. And so what could happen here is a month or 2 in, if the Red Sox are struggling, then you say, well, is it a leadership issue? Do they have a guy already on this team right now who can turn it around with his leadership? And that's where the questions are going to come in. But you don't think that's a problem for?
Well, no. I mean, I look at it this way: two consecutive last place finishers. So let's just say Dombrowski came in as president of baseball ops and decided to bring Farrell back. I'm creating an alternate timeline in which Farrell does not have stage 1 lymphoma. He comes back as manager. Team gets off to a bad start. They would have fired him anyway. And I think the same thing is in place. He's the manager of the Red Sox. Dombrowski's president of baseball ops. He reports to John Henry and Tom Werner. If the team gets off to a bad start, they're going to fire him. If the team got off to a bad start, absence of any incidences with cancer, they still would have fired him. So I don't see it how it makes any difference.
Right. The big change I think that we might see this year, what John talked about today, is managing with a sense of urgency, which if you're following the Red Sox the last couple of years, that might be your biggest complaint with the Red Sox, is that they haven't managed with a sense of urgency. Players who have struggled, Mike Napoli, Shane Victorino, Hanley Ramirez last year, Pablo Sandoval, guys in the starting rotation, Rick Porcello, Joe Kelly, countless guys who have not been performing continue to stay in the lineup regularly. They stay in the rotation regularly. So when John Farrell talks about managing with a sense of urgency, I think what he's saying to fans is, hey, I know that we can't be in last place again. If there are problems this year, we're going to have to make changes. I'm willing to make those changes quicker than I have in the past, which has to be a good thing.
Yes,
for the Red Sox. Right?
Well, you got to remember they won the World Series in 2013, and the year after a team wins the World Series, I'm not saying the expectations are lower, but the patience is higher. The threshold of the pain is higher. And in 2014, Red Sox fans are obviously not satisfied. John Lester gets traded at the deadline along with half the team. They get through it. Then they come in last year. It's a bright new team. Sandoval and Ramirez and Porcello and Joe Kelly, all this. And the team was lousy. And that's when the patience wore thin. Particularly, as you pointed out, there never seemed to be a sense of urgency. How many times did runners figure out how many outs there were? How many times did guys run into outs? How many times were players in the wrong position? How many times did pitchers fail to get out of the 3rd or 4th inning? And afterwards, and again, my big criticism of John Farrell, I remember one game in particular, Buckholz was just awful. Gave up, I think it was Joey Butler's first career home run.
Right, over the Green Monster.
Over the Green Monster. And then he settled down for a couple of innings, and all Farrell wanted to talk about was, boy, you settled down just great, oh boy. And I didn't like that. I needed to hear more about the pitches he didn't make and how bad he was that night overall. And we need to see more of that this season. I'm not expecting Farrell to suddenly become Billy Martin from back in the 70s and 80s and start calling out players. That just generally doesn't happen in this day and age. But I think a bit more candor might serve him well.
Right, and that's what he alluded to today, that he would have a different perspective. Bob, do we have any questions or comments from people? Not yet. Well, if you guys have any questions or comments, please get them out there, share them with us. We're hoping to answer them for you right now. The next thing, the obvious subject that we can talk about that's on everybody's minds in Fort Myers is Hanley Ramirez. And when you talk about a sense of urgency and making decisions, this is one that is going to be on Farrell's mind, you would have to think, from day one. Can Hanley Ramirez prove that he's an everyday first baseman? Will he have to get a lot of rest? How good will Travis Shaw play, and how will that force John Farrell to make quicker decisions? Do you think it's a given Buck, that Hanley's going to be playing at least 4 or 5 times a week, or do you think that there's actually some competition?
There is no competition, given the amount of money they pay him and the offense he's capable of mustering if he's healthy and his head's in the game and so forth. I don't expect him to be a bench player. My gut tells me that Dombrowski pursued opportunities to deal him in the offseason. Didn't get anything for him, obviously, because he's still here. And my other gut feeling is that they're basically trying to get through this season and somehow make it all work, because David Ortiz retires at the end of the season, and then Hanley becomes, we assume, the full-time DH moving forward after 2016.
Unless Hanley wins a Gold Glove,
unless
he
wins a Gold
and then
Glove,
he
yes.
wants to stay at first base.
Well, is that so? And we can only hope. But here's the way I look at it. They signed David Price, what, 7 years?
Right.
Okay, so they've got David Price for 7 years. I happen to think that of those 7 years,
Unless he opts out.
but his prime years, the best years he'll be giving the Red Sox, we assume would be this year, next year.
3 years that he's guaranteed to be here.
Yeah, 3 years, and those are the prime years. And let's just break it down to 3 years. They're going to get 3 years of David Price, health, and everything being taken into consideration, along the lines of what he's been the last 2 years. Was he 18-5 last year?
I don't know what his record was, but he's been.
So let's assume that he's going to be a great pitcher for 3 years. Do you really want to basically throw away one of those years, 33% of those prime years, because you have this so-called experiment, or whatever you want to call it, with Hanley Ramirez at first base?
So you think it could be disastrous?
I think it could be disastrous. They've got a fading defensive third baseman in Pablo Sandoval, and I saw a picture. He looks better, but the numbers have gone down for him the last couple of 3 years. And you got Hanley Ramirez, who's never played the position before. He had never played left field before. What could possibly go wrong? He's a major league shortstop. Certainly a major league shortstop who loved to play the outfield. Robin Young did it. I think he won a Gold Glove out there, an MVP. I know that. So why not take a guy who had been a shortstop and put him out in left field? He can just, but it was a disaster.
Right.
And I'm almost 60 years old. That's the worst everyday left field I have ever seen. I'm not being mean when I say that. I can't.
Is first base easier?
Well, having never played either position, I can't. I think it depends.
Should it be?
on. Well, it's a more important position.
It is.
In that there are more balls hit on the ground to these 3 other infielders than are hit to one left fielder in a 9-inning game. That's simple math. And you've got Pedroia at second, Bogarts at short, Sandoval at third. And if Hanley screws up a ball in left field, the only guy who's really going to be upset from a personal standpoint is the guy on the rubber.
Right.
If he screws up plays at first base, you've got the potential of 3 everyday infielders coming in there and being upset. Sandoval on my short list for this because he's got a lot to prove this season.
And his throws were not perfect last year.
No.
He had some throwing issues for quite a bit, where he was overthrowing. Hanley said he's hoping everybody hits him in the chest, but that's just not the way it works at first
No,
base.
it's not.
There are going to be some bad throws. So I hear what you're saying. You think it could be disastrous. It could really impact the other players.
Yeah, I do.
Which is a good point.
And there's something else to keep in mind. I think a lot of people, mostly people who've been around longer, tend to fall into a trap, and that's really what it is, of saying, well, it's first base, that's where you take the sorry guy on defense. That may have been the way pre-1970s when there was no DH, and you did have guys who weren't very good at first base. Those days are gone. You got to be able to play the position.
Yeah, you do. And it looks like we got a question from Bob.
Not a question, but a comment. Jay Pappas says Hanley was an infielder earlier, so playing the infield is not as foreign as playing the outfield. So he should be ahead of the game that way.
Right. And that's the assumption that you make. And you assume that he's more athletic. He says he lost a few pounds. He does look a little bit more athletic. It's hard to say. It's only been 1-2 days here in spring training, so it'd be impossible for us to judge that yet. Buster Olney, I thought, had a great column in ESPN today where he said, the Red Sox don't have to be married to Hanley Ramirez. This is an experiment. This is not a guarantee. Dave Dombrowski has never guaranteed that this would work. Mike Hazen's never guaranteed that this would work. This is something that they're going to try out right now. And if it doesn't work, there are other options. As Dave Dombrowski walks by as we're filming right now. They have other options. Travis Shaw is a very capable first baseman. Sam Travis, who we saw in camp today, check out his minor league numbers. The kid was an unbelievable player at Indiana, 385 on-base percentage in Double-A. There are free agents, Justin Morneau. There are other things that they can do if Hanley Ramirez doesn't work out. So I don't think I don't think they're married to this situation. There are other options.
Right, and the one thing I'd say is regarding the fact that Hanley's shortstop is now playing first base, they're both infield positions. That is true to an extent, but except that you're getting the ball here and throwing it across the diamond, whereas when you're a first baseman, there's one play, Lou Maloney mentioned it in WEI the other day, if you're coming in the ball and you've got to turn to make the throw to second base with the runner coming up the line. And that's an entirely different throw than a shortstop would ever make. So there are a lot of differences between, I know they're both infield positions, plus it's a different club. I mean, and you're also picking balls out of the dirt that you've never done before. I mean, maybe an occasional throw to second base and stolen base where you have to kind of scoop it up and slap down the tag. But they are vastly different positions, even though they are both infield.
So the question I think that the Red Sox are going to have to deal with most then will become if Hanley Ramirez is hitting. If he's hitting 300, 330, do they leave him out there even if his defense isn't great? Because if he's hitting like that, maybe they could swallow the defense. We got another question.
Yeah, do you see Shaw and Ramirez platooning the position if each are hitting equally well?
I don't think there would be a platoon at the position. Shaw, I mean, that would imply that Ramirez is only going to play once or twice a week when there's a left-hander on the mound, and Shaw's a left-handed hitting first baseman. He would get the giant size of that platoon. Maybe later, that would be like an emergency situation, I think, in June or July if Hanley's playing horribly at first base.
Yeah, I can't add to that. I think that's a bullseye.
Yeah, I mean, it's an idea, but it's unlikely. I think Hanley's going to get a lot of time to prove himself.
But he would be the leading defensive guy, obviously.
Right.
And I can almost guarantee that in a perfect situation where Hanley is the experiment is going reasonably well to the degree that, and again, how bad does he have to be? I mean, bad's a big word. And if he's just playing okay there, Shaw's still going to start 1 or 2 games a week at first base. I mean, it's not going to be. One thing I can guarantee you is, under the best circumstances, Hanley's not going to play even 150 games at first base. They are going to get this kid in there once a week or something.
Right. Looks like we don't have any questions or comments yet from you guys. I'll give you another minute to get them in because I have one other thing I want to add and ask you about, Buck. For me, the one big storyline that I am really interested in watching unfold is the catching situation. I think you have a young catcher in Blake Swihart who could be an all-star for years because of how good he is at the plate as a switch hitter. Still not there defensively, though, with a mediocre pitching staff. Now, I know they got Price now, but there are also question marks in the back end of that pitching staff. Do you need a defensive first catcher, or can you live with Swihart as your everyday catcher?
Well, again, my answer to that would be it depends on how much offense versus how much lack of defense he's giving you. If he's giving you a middle of the road on both, then I think he'll be fine. To amplify your question in your statement, I think that one of the most untalked about stories of last season was Swihart's play behind the plate, or his play in general. He never was supposed to be here. At best, he was supposed to come up at some point during the season for a cup of coffee. We understood the other bright young catching prospect was going to be the starting catcher. At least that's the way I read the tea leaves. Then a whole bunch of things happened with injuries, including Hannigan, and all of a sudden this kid who shouldn't have been a big league catcher was thrust into the role. And boy, he really figured it out by the end of the season. And again, the cancer scare with Farrell, the fact that so many players are traded, they were out of it by the time the Patriots were in training camp. We collectively kind of lost interest, not you because you covered the team, but fans in general, more or less lost interest in the team by the end of the season. And this kid didn't get enough good love.
Yeah, I thought he was great. He was supposed to be a AAA, there's no question. He didn't have any experience when he came up. It's just that Vasquez is so good defensively. You wonder how much he could help you out in that area. Do we have any more questions?
Yeah, how short of a leash is Farrell on this year?
Buck?
I think it's overrated. If the team plays abysmally, and it's not just winning and losing, it's how they win and lose. If runners are forgetting how many outs there are, both in the field and at bat and on the bases, if there's a general malaise, which I happen to think was in place last season, he's going to get fired. If there's a rash of injuries and things just aren't going right, and then they would have fired Farrell, I think that would be making him a scapegoat. Right. I don't think that Dombrowski is in the scapegoat business. No. Just my take on it. So it would be a question of not just if they lose, but how they lose.
And who is the number 2 starter?
I would say Porcello.
I think it's Buchholz. Okay. And Porcello's never been a number 2 starter. He's a number 3 guy. He's a great number 3 guy. He's a consistent 4 ERA every year when he was with the Tigers.
You're wrong.
Sometimes he's a 3.5 ERA guy. Sometimes it's 4.5. He's a 3 guy. Who's capable Listen, Eduardo Rodriguez could be a number 1 eventually. He's still young. He's 23.
It's
I'm
funny
not
you should
putting
say
a
that.
number on him.
I once said that Dubront was going to win 20 games, and
A lot of people thought that.
And I saw him pitch a game in Manchester, New Hampshire, Portland, way back in the day, and I went up to see, I think, Smoltz, and I was up here for a couple of days, and because Smoltz was in a rehab, and I drove home like, this Dubront kid, he's going to be lights out.
Unbelievable stuff.
And he had a weight problem. I think he had an attitude problem. I just don't think his head was in the game. It didn't work out. So I'm going to say it again. I think this kid's going to win 20 games based on what we saw last year. He's a lot fiercer a warrior on the mound, in my opinion, than Dubront ever was.
Yeah, I think he still has work to do.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's the move to first and the balking and all that stuff.
Yeah, there's
all
that.
but
I think, Carl Willis, the pitching coach, said last year he wanted to see a little bit better work ethic from Eduardo Rodriguez. Sometimes you see young guys come up and they take success for granted. It takes a little bit of time for them to get used to it. So maybe that's something that David Price can help him with. Teach him how to work, what the preparation needs to be like.
Moncada called up in September, or wait till next year?
I think Yohan Moncada, considered one of the best prospects in baseball. I think he's number 2 by Baseball America. Unbelievable athlete, incredibly gifted. Still only has 1 year of professional experience in America under his belt. It all depends for me how well the Red Sox are playing and if there's a need. We didn't think we'd see Twihart last year. What if Pedroia gets injured and they don't have, Brock Holt or Mookie Betts can play second. But there are situations where if Moncada's playing great and there's a need, maybe we see him at some point.
I saw Moncada play last year. I took a trip down to Greenville with some friends. It was kind of a working vacation. And 2 takeaways on Moncada. There was a throw to second base, I think we talked about this, that only Robbie Alomar could have made. And I know that he's kind of blocky, he doesn't really look like a big league second baseman. But he took a throw on a stolen base on the inside part of second base, on the shortstop side, scooped it up, came across definitely and put the tag down. And I was looking right down behind the first base dugout, and I said, that's a great play. I also saw him missing high school curveballs by that much. Right. He was really just flailing. I am told by the end of the season, the stats would bear this out, he conquered that problem, and he was raking. So I think his trajectory is on course, and I think he's going to be a very good Major League Baseball player.
Yeah.
Rusney Castillo, is he a bust, or is there still time?
Still time, but this is the year. This is his chance. He's going to play left field every day to start the season. There are other guys who want that job. Travis Shaw can play left field. Brock Holt needs to get in the lineup at some point. A great player can play left field. Chris Young was brought in here, hits left-handers tremendously well, can play left field. So it's not going to be a guarantee that Rusney gets to be out there.
Should it be. Major League instincts. I didn't see Major League instincts last year. You certainly see them from Betts. You certainly, at least on the field, you see them from Bradley, who's one of the best defensive center fielders I've ever seen. And Rusney, no, I'm not there with him yet. I need to see instinct. I need to see a lot more than I saw last year.
Yeah.
I don't see a big league ball player. I don't see a big league ball player.
We haven't seen it yet from him. The Red Sox think it's there. Obviously, he's incredibly talented.
That's what they're going to say, yeah.
Well, they paid him. They're going to say it. They also gave him $72 million.
Except that the guy that gave him the $72 million, whatever, is no longer on the payroll.
Dave Dombrowski wanted to give him a lot of money, too, when he was with the Tigers. he didn't have $72 million to offer. But there are a lot of people who think this guy is going to be.
And I hope they're right. But I like I said, it's go back to what you said.
He hasn't shown it yet.
It is time for him to put up some numbers.
This is his time. Bob?
A couple of questions from a bunch of viewers. When is Ortiz reporting? Does anybody know?
He usually shows up right on time, so I think Tuesday maybe.
Yeah,
is the first.
I
can't remember.
It's a good question because everyone gets excited when David Ortiz shows up, but it's not like he has things to work on.
Right.
It would be more PR and media availability and doing TV hits and things like that. It's not like if he shows up on Wednesday instead of Tuesday and then he goes 0 for 4 with 3 punch-outs on opening day, we're going to look back on this. So
right.
Good question to ask because everyone's excited to see him, but I wouldn't get in a snit if he was a day late.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter. He never hits in spring training. I think his spring training career batting average is like 220. He doesn't care about spring training. He doesn't need to. He's one of the guys who's proven that. Not everybody can do that.
I was around when Yaz played. Yaz spring training was, he never saw the inside of a bus after he was 26 years old. He was a Channel Lakes Park guy and not a let's drive up to Bradenton guy, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so he just hung around here and took it easy.
Win prediction.
This is probably a good one for us to close out on. I haven't settled on a number yet. I think we haven't put together our preview section for the Herald paper yet. I'm still thinking about it, but I think they're going to probably be somewhere in between 83 and 89 wins. I don't think this is a flawless team. I think there are too many questions for them to be a flawless team. They have the talent to win more games than that, but to me it comes down to their offense. There are so many questions in that lineup. If they are a top 5 offense like they were at the end of last year, and now you add David Price to the mix, and now you add a better bullpen, then they're a playoff team. If they're not a top 5 offense, I don't think they have the talent to be a playoff team unless they're hitting.
I agree with all that. The one change I would make is the lens through which I look at it is I still see a weak AL East. Obviously, Toronto is weaker because they don't have David Price. I know they got other workable parts and young pitching coming along, but I think it's a weaker division that's going to help them. We said this last year. We said that they couldn't possibly be as bad as they were the year before, and they were just as bad, even though the numbers were better because they won games late in the season when games didn't matter. So I'm throwing out the 78 and 84. I think they were last year. It was a terrible team last year.
78 wins.
That was a terrible team last year, and they will be better than that. And while we are taught not to take too much stock in numbers in spring training, particularly with pitching, you know, what Buckley, Kelly, and these guys do in spring training, I'm not going to put a whole lot of stock in that. But I think I will have a sense on whether Hanley Ramirez is going to play first base by the end of spring training, and I will have a sense on what we're going to get out of Pablo Sandoval. And to me, those are 2 guys I want to keep an eye on.
It's amazing how much those 2 guys can impact the team.
Yeah.
And we saw it last year. They're statistically 2 of the worst players in the game. And look what happened. So they're capable of being some of the best players in the game. We've seen it. They're going to have to do something close to it if this team's going to function as well as they can. Thank you so much, guys, for watching and for commenting and asking questions. We hope to do this again and hopefully have more comments.
Every day, all spring training.
Not every day, but hopefully, hopefully again soon. Big thanks to Bob Grimes behind the camera. Steve Buckley, I'm Jason Mastrodonato. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for reading. And buy a newspaper tomorrow.